The box marked 32 foot. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of sunlight slicing through the attic's gloom. Avery coughed, waving a hand in front of her face. The air hung thick and stale, smelling of forgotten things and moth-eaten dreams. She'd promised herself she'd tackle this space weeks ago, but the allure of sunshine and iced tea on the porch had always won. Today, however, a persistent leak in the roof, coupled with her grandmother's insistent prodding, had finally driven her upward. The attic was a repository of generations. Trunks overflowed with yellowed lace and brittle photographs. A rocking horse, its paint chipped and faded, stood sentinel in a corner. Avery ran a finger across its worn saddle, a pang of nostalgia hitting her for a childhood she barely remembered. She navigated through the clutter, careful not to snag her jeans on stray nails or topple precariously stacked boxes. Her grandmother, Nana Elsie, had warned her about the ghosties that supposedly haunted the attic, but Avery, a staunch believer in logic and science, dismissed it as old wives' tales. Still, a shiver traced its way down her spine as a gust of wind rattled the single, grime-coated window. Tucked away beneath a pile of discarded quilts, almost hidden from view, was a small, wooden box. It wasn't particularly remarkable, just plain, unvarnished wood, worn smooth with age. But it was the inscription etched into the lid that caught Avery's attention. Scrawled in faded ink, barely legible, were the numbers, 32 foot. Avery frowned. 32. What could it mean? She lifted the box, surprised by its weight. It was heavier than it looked, solid and substantial in her hands. Curiosity overriding caution, she carried it over to the window where the light was strongest. The latch was stiff with rust, but after a moment's struggle, it gave way with a protesting squeal. Avery lifted the lid, holding her breath. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, were stones. Not ordinary stones, but polished, vibrantly colored stones. There was a crimson one, like a drop of solidified blood, an emerald green one that seemed to glow from within, a sapphire blue one that shimmered with an inner light, and a golden yellow one that pulsed with warmth. Each stone was perfectly smooth, cool to the touch, and radiated an almost palpable energy. Avery picked up the crimson stone, turning it over in her fingers. It felt strangely familiar, as if she'd held it before, perhaps in a dream. A faint tingling sensation ran up her arm, leaving goosebumps in its wake. She glanced around the attic, suddenly feeling like she was being watched. The shadows seemed to deepen, to press in on her. Nana Elsie's ghosties suddenly seemed a lot less like old wives' tales. Closing the lid, Avery quickly tucked the box under her arm. She had a feeling that these stones and the number 32 were about to unravel a secret far bigger and far stranger than she could have ever imagined. And she had a feeling it would change everything. Whispers of the wishing well. The worn velvet of the jewelry box felt strangely warm beneath Avery's fingers as she lifted the 3 stones. Grandpa's workshop smelled of sawdust and pipe tobacco, a comforting aroma that usually calmed her. Today, though, her nerves buzzed like trapped wasps. "Grandpa, I found these." She held out her hand, palm open, showcasing the shimmering stones. The amethyst pulsed with a deep violet light, the citron glowed like captured sunlight, and the obsidian held an unnerving, absorbing darkness. He peered at them over his spectacles, his brow furrowed in a way she hadn't seen before. He reached out, his calloused fingers surprisingly gentle as he picked up the amethyst. He turned it over and over, light catching in its facets. "Where did you find these, Avery?" His voice was low, almost a rumble. "Near the old wishing well." A flicker of something, fear, crossed his face, gone so quickly Avery almost missed it. He set the amethyst back in her palm. "The wishing well," he sighed, the sound heavy with years. "That's just a story, Avery. A silly legend to scare children from wandering too far into the woods." But she hesitated. "They feel different. Special." He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Everything feels special when you're young, child. Imagination is a powerful thing." He walked to his workbench, fiddling with a half-finished carving of a wren. But Avery could see his hands trembled slightly. "Tell me the story, Grandpa." He sighed again, relenting. "All right. Legend says the wishing well isn't just a well. It's a gateway, a place where the veil between worlds is thin. Generations ago, so the story goes, a traveler stumbled upon it. Thirsty and lost, he drank from the well, and the water granted him a vision. He saw 3 stones, imbued with the well's magic, each holding the power to grant a single wish. A wish. Avery's heart leaped. 1 wish per stone. But the story warns they come with a price. The well demands balance. For every desire fulfilled, something must be given in return. Something equal in value. Some say it takes years to manifest, others say it's immediate. But the well always collects its due. He paused, staring at the stones in her hand. The traveler, blinded by greed, took all 3 stones. He wished for wealth, for power, and for eternal life. He got them all. But he lost everything he held dear, his family, his friends, his very soul. He became a hollow shell, a prisoner of his own desires. Avery swallowed, the vibrant colors of the stones suddenly dull. And the stones? The stones returned to the well, waiting for another to find them. Hoping, perhaps, that someone would be wiser. He looked directly at her, his eyes piercing. Avery, these are just stories. But some stories hold a grain of truth. Best to leave them be. Bury them again. Avery clutched the stones tighter. The cool obsidian pulsed against her skin. I don't know, Grandpa. I think I need to understand them better. A wish come true. Avery stared at the 3 stones nestled in her palm. Dusk painted the attic window in hues of violet and rose, casting long shadows that danced around the dust mote swirling in the air. The smooth coolness of the stones against her skin felt strangely alive, a subtle thrumming energy that resonated deep within her bones. Could it really be this simple? Could these ordinary-looking rocks truly hold the power to grant wishes? She'd spent the better part of the afternoon poring over Great Aunt Elara's journals, deciphering cryptic passages and sketching diagrams that hinted at the stone's abilities. The journals spoke of control, of focus, of the need for absolute clarity in one's desire. But they were maddeningly vague on the specifics. It was time to test the theory. Avery glanced around the cluttered attic. Cobwebs draped like macabre decorations over forgotten furniture, and the air hung heavy with the scent of mothballs and decay. This place had been frozen in time, a repository of forgotten memories. A sudden longing for something brighter, something sweeter, blossomed within her. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and focused. No grand ambitions, no world-altering requests, just a simple, innocent wish. She pictured it vividly in her mind. A single, perfectly ripe strawberry. The kind that bursts with flavor, the kind that stains your fingers crimson. She imagined the sweet aroma, the juicy texture, the perfect balance of tartness and sweetness. Clutching the stones tightly, Avery whispered, "I wish for a strawberry." The attic remained silent. Disappointment pricked at her. Perhaps the journals were just fanciful ramblings, the product of an eccentric old woman's imagination. Maybe she'd been foolish to believe. Then, a faint scent, sharp and fruity, tickled her nose. She opened her eyes. On the dusty floor, nestled amongst a pile of discarded sheet music, sat a single strawberry. It glowed, impossibly red against the drab backdrop of the attic. The air around it shimmered faintly, as if heat radiated from its surface. Avery approached cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. The scent intensified, filling the air with the intoxicating fragrance of summer. She knelt down, her fingers trembling as she reached for the strawberry. It was perfectly formed, plump and glistening with droplets of moisture. Hesitantly, she brought it to her lips and took a bite. The flavor exploded in her mouth, a symphony of sweetness and tartness that sent shivers down her spine. It was the most delicious strawberry she had ever tasted, surpassing even the ones from Farmer McGregor's prize-winning patch. Avery swallowed, her eyes wide with disbelief. It was real. The stones, the journals, the whispers of magic. It was all real. A wave of exhilaration washed over her, so potent it almost knocked her off her feet. She had proof. She held unimaginable power in the palm of her hand. Secrets and suspicions. Avery bounced on the balls of her feet, impatience radiating off her like heat from a furnace. Ben chewed his lip, eyes glued to the worn wooden box resting on his desk. "Are you going to open it, or just stare at it all day?" Avery finally burst out. Ben sighed, pushing his glasses higher on his nose. "I still think this is insane. Magical stones? Avery, really?" He knew he sounded skeptical, but caution was practically woven into his DNA. "Just look," Avery insisted, grabbing the box and practically shoving it into his hands. He carefully lifted the lid. The stones nestled within glowed softly, bathing the room in a warm, inviting light. There was the deep, earthy green one, the fiery orange, and the cool, tranquil blue. He picked up the blue one, feeling its smooth, almost silken texture against his skin. A faint tingling sensation spread through his hand. "Okay," he admitted slowly, placing the stone back in the box. Maybe there's something to this." He looked at Avery, a mixture of awe and apprehension in his eyes. By lunchtime, whispers about Avery's box had already begun to circulate through the school. Ben overheard snatches of conversation in the hallway. Did you see it? It glows, and they say it can grant wishes. He tried to ignore it, but the sheer volume of gossip was impossible to block out. Avery, oblivious or perhaps deliberately ignoring the attention, was happily sketching in her notebook at their usual table in the cafeteria. Their peaceful lunch was interrupted by a looming shadow. Mr. Grumbles, the school's notoriously grumpy history teacher, stood beside their table, his face a mask of thinly veiled curiosity. Carter, isn't it? Anne? Avery Bell, correct? Ben swallowed hard. Mr. Grumbles rarely spoke to students outside of class, and when he did, it was usually to deliver a withering reprimand. Yes, sir, Ben mumbled. Mr. Grumbles' gaze flickered to the worn leather satchel beside Avery. I hear you've come into possession of an interesting artifact. Avery looked up, her eyes narrowing slightly. I'm not sure what you mean, Mr. Grumbles. Oh, come now, Miss Bell. Don't play coy with me. Whispers travel fast in these hallowed halls. A box said to contain stones of considerable historical significance. He paused, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity. I would be most interested in examining it for purely academic purposes, of course. Avery gripped her pencil tightly, her knuckles white. It's personal property, Mr. Grumbles. I don't think so. Mr. Grumbles' smile vanished, replaced by a tight, almost predatory expression. Perhaps you misunderstand. I'm not asking for permission, Miss Bell. I am merely expressing a professional interest. After all, it would be a shame if such a valuable object were to fall into the wrong hands. Wouldn't it? He lingered for another moment, his gaze fixed on Avery, before turning and stalking away, leaving a chill in the air. Ben watched him go, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. That was weird, he said quietly. Avery didn't respond, her eyes still fixed on the spot where Mr. Grumbles had been standing. We need to be careful, Ben, she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. I think he knows more than he's letting on. The Candy Mountain calamity. Careful, Avery, Ben cautioned, his brow furrowed. He watched her juggle 3 lollipops, each a different shade of neon. Remember what happened with the bouncy castle? You wished for it to be bigger, and it nearly swallowed the entire park. Avery giggled, unwrapping a cherry-flavored lollipop with a flourish. But it was fun. Besides, she added with a wink, what's the worst that could happen with candy? Ben sighed, picking at a loose thread on his jeans. He worried about her impulsive wish-making. It wasn't that he didn't enjoy the magic, but Avery had a knack for taking things too far, too fast. Just think before you wish. Okay? Maybe wish for something small, something manageable. Avery chewed thoughtfully, her eyes scanning the room. I wish there was a mountain of candy right here. The air shimmered, and a low rumble shook the floor. Before Ben could even shout a warning, a colossal mound of sugary goodness erupted in the center of Avery's bedroom. Chocolate bars formed towering peaks. Gummy bears tumbled down caramel slopes, and rivers of liquid chocolate flowed through valleys of hard candy. The sheer scale of it was breathtaking and terrifying. Whoa! Avery breathed, her eyes wide. I did not expect that. Ben stared, speechless, his jaw practically scraping the floor. He'd pictured maybe a small hill, not a confectionery Everest. Avery, this is insane. How are we going to clean this up? Clean up? Avery waved her hand dismissively, already scaling a particularly tempting-looking licorice cliff. I wish this room was self-cleaning. Another wave of magic pulsed through the room, this one feeling different, more chaotic. Instead of tidying, the room seemed to convulse. The candy mountain began to shift and melt at an alarming rate, rivers of chocolate cascading onto the floor. Toys levitated, swirling in a dizzying vortex. A robotic vacuum cleaner, apparently taking the self-cleaning directive a little too literally, sprouted multiple arms and legs, chasing after rogue gummy bears with a terrifyingly determined whir. Okay, maybe that wasn't the best idea, Avery admitted, grabbing Ben's arm. This is getting a little out of hand. The chocolate river was rising, threatening to engulf them both. The vacuum shrieked as it sucked up a handful of rock candy, promptly exploding in a shower of plastic shrapnel and sugary dust. Ben grabbed Avery's hand, pulling her towards the door. Out of hand? Avery, this is a full-blown Candy Mountain calamity. We need to get out of here before we're buried alive in fudge. Vanishing VJ. The rhythmic thwack of VJ dribbling his basketball against the hallway wall was a metronome counting down Avery's sanity. He was supposed to be practicing outside, soaking up the last dregs of the afternoon sun, but no. Here he was, a sweaty, bouncing menace in their already cramped hallway. "VJ, can you not?" Avery snapped, not bothering to look up from her homework. Equations swam before her eyes, blurring into a chaotic mess mirroring her inner state. Trig was not cooperating, and VJ's incessant bouncing was the last straw. "Can't not what?" he retorted, the ball momentarily silent. "Practice my mad skills? Prepare for my future NBA career?" He punctuated the question with another ear-splitting thwack. Avery slammed her textbook shut. "Your future NBA career is going to be cut short by a noise complaint. Go outside." VJ, impervious to her rising fury, just grinned. "It's too hot outside." Besides, he lowered his voice conspiratorially, leaning closer, the smell of cheap deodorant and adolescent energy assaulting her nostrils. "Mom said I can practice inside." Avery squeezed her eyes shut. Mom always took his side. "Fine," she ground out, just be quiet." She knew it was a losing battle. Arguing with VJ was like trying to nail jelly to a tree. He dribbled the ball faster, a manic glint in his eye. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Avery felt a sharp, almost painful throb behind her temples. The numbers in her textbook danced mockingly. Her carefully constructed fortress of concentration crumbled. "I wish," she hissed, the words escaping before she could fully process them. "I wish you would just disappear." The thwack stopped. Avery opened her eyes, expecting another smart-aleck retort, another volley of teenage angst. But VJ wasn't there. The basketball lay silent on the carpet, the only evidence he had ever been in the hallway at all. Avery blinked. Once. Twice. She stood up, heart hammering against her ribs. "VJ," she called, her voice trembling slightly. Silence. She walked to the end of the hallway, peering into the living room. Empty. The kitchen? Empty. The back porch, where he sometimes snuck off to listen to music. Deserted. A cold dread began to creep up her spine, a chilling vine tightening its grip with each passing second. This wasn't like him. VJ, for all his infuriating habits, was always there. He was a constant, buzzing presence, an unavoidable force of nature. He didn't just vanish. She took a shaky step back, her gaze fixed on the basketball lying abandoned like a discarded toy. The hallway suddenly felt vast and empty, the silence amplifying the frantic beat of her own heart. Avery whispered, the word barely audible, "VJ." Panic flared, hot and sharp. She had wished he would disappear. And now he had. A wave of nausea washed over her. It had been a stupid, childish wish, the kind you made in anger and instantly regretted. But it had come true. And the weight of that realization, the sheer, terrifying improbability of it all, threatened to crush her. Talent show tussle. The air in the gymnasium crackled with anticipation, smelling faintly of popcorn and nervous sweat. Banners proclaiming "Shine Bright" hung askew, reflecting the glare of the makeshift stage lighting. Ben fidgeted beside Avery, the small wooden box containing the stones heavy in his backpack. "Relax, Ben," Avery whispered, adjusting her sequined microphone. "Nobody's going to try anything with 100 pairs of eyes watching." Ben chewed his lip. "That's what worries me. It's too obvious. He could be planning something bigger." The talent show kicked off with a surprisingly adept rendition of Bohemian Rhapsody by the 7th grade a cappella group, followed by a juggling act featuring rubber chickens that went slightly awry. As a magician sought his assistant, a very game Mrs. Higgins in half, Ben scanned the crowd. There, lurking near the back by the refreshment table, was Mr. Grumbles. He was disguised in a ridiculous Hawaiian shirt and oversized sunglasses, but Ben recognized the hunched posture and the glint of malice in his eyes. "Avery," Ben hissed, tugging her sleeve. "He's here." Avery followed his gaze, her own eyes widening. "Okay, new plan. I'll stall. You get the box somewhere safe." Before Ben could protest, she was bounding onto the stage. "And now," she announced, her voice amplified by the microphone, "I will be performing a dramatic interpretive dance." The crowd roared with confused applause. Ben seized the opportunity. He slipped away, heading for the janitor's closet he'd scouted earlier. He shoved the box deep inside a bucket filled with cleaning supplies, hoping the pungent smell of pine cleaner would deter anyone. He was halfway back to the gymnasium when he heard the commotion. A shriek, followed by a chorus of gasps. Ben sprinted back, pushing through the crowd. On stage, chaos reigned. Avery was wrestling with Mr. Grumbles, who had shed his Hawaiian disguise and was now brandishing a small, metallic crowbar. The microphone lay abandoned, squawking feedback. "Give me the box, you little brat." Mr. Grumbles snarled, his voice surprisingly high-pitched. Avery, nimble as a cat, dodged his clumsy attempts to grab her. "Never," she yelled, kicking him in the shin. Ben saw his chance. He darted around the back of the stage, grabbed a fire extinguisher, and aimed. With a satisfying whoosh, a cloud of white powder engulfed Mr. Grumbles. He sputtered and coughed, temporarily blinded. Avery, seizing the moment, delivered a swift kick to his behind, sending him sprawling into the curtain. The curtain, weakened by years of questionable school productions, promptly collapsed, burying Mr. Grumbles in a heap of dusty velvet. The audience erupted in a mixture of laughter and applause. Ben, covered in fire extinguisher dust, pulled Avery to her feet. "Well," she said, brushing off her sequined costume. "That was certainly dramatic." Ben, still breathless, managed a weak smile. "Let's just say your act needed a little powder. Restoring what was lost." Avery gripped the last few smooth stones, their coolness a balm against her frantic heartbeat. The atmosphere thrummed, charged with the silent promise of restitution. Ben's gaze was fixed on her, his expression a worried blend of anticipation and fear. "Avery, are you certain? These are all we have left. Precision is paramount." "I know, Ben, I know," she breathed, barely audible. "But we have to. We must get VJ back." Her eyes squeezed shut, conjuring VJ's bright, easy smile, the laugh lines fanning from his eyes. Centering herself, she raised a stone. "I wish VJ Patel returned, safe and whole, untouched by any wish made against him." The stone flared with a lambent glow, then faded, leaving Avery winded but hopeful. A beat of absolute quiet, punctuated only by a distant crow's call. Then, a disturbance in the dense foliage edging the park. VJ emerged, blinking in bewilderment. What happened? Feels like I've lost days. And where's Mr. Grumbles?" Avery surged forward, wrapping him in a tight embrace. "VJ, you're back, you're really back." Ben thumped him on the back, relief flooding his face. "Mr. Grumbles won't be a problem anymore," he declared, a newfound resolve sharpening his tone. "Avery's got a few stones remaining, and we're going to undo all his damage." One by one, Avery deployed the remaining stones, unraveling the twisted whims that had plagued the town. Leaden skies transformed into a cerulean expanse, drooping flowers in the park lifted their heads, and the stifling weight that had descended over their community began to lift. As they worked, a rasping voice, like gravel on glass, echoed across the green space. "So, you believe you've triumphed, do you?" Mr. Grumbles materialized from behind a venerable oak, his face a mask of fury. He lurched toward them, one clawed hand reaching. With lightning reflexes, Ben scooped up a handful of acorns strewn on the path. He launched them at Mr. Grumbles, bombarding him with surprisingly effective projectiles. Mr. Grumbles flailed at the acorns, momentarily thrown off balance. Avery saw her chance. Recalling the riddle, she snatched a discarded newspaper from a nearby bench. "Mr. Grumbles, what has an eye but cannot see?" she shouted, her voice resonating with newfound strength. Mr. Grumbles stiffened, his eyes widening with terror. "No, you wouldn't dare." Avery displayed the newspaper, the headline screaming, "Local businesses thriving." She indicated a photograph accompanying the article, a close-up portrait of a shopkeeper beaming for the camera. "An eye! Right there!" Mr. Grumbles emitted a piercing shriek, clutching his temples. A vortex of dust and swirling leaves enveloped him, and with a final, strangled roar, he vanished, leaving only the lingering reek of sulfur. The three friends stood in the now bright park, chests heaving. The air was clean, the mood buoyant. The specter of Mr. Grumbles, for the moment, was banished. The true treasure. The weight of the wooden box felt different now, heavier somehow, not with gold, but with the quiet expectation of untold possibilities. Or, Avery realized, the potential for untold chaos. "We can't just leave it here," Ben said, kicking at a loose stone near the base of the oak. "Someone else might find it." "Back to the attic, then?" Avery suggested, but the thought felt wrong. The attic felt too close, too accessible. This felt like something that needed to be safeguarded. Ben chewed on his lip, a habit he had when deep in thought. "No, we need a real hiding place. Somewhere no one would ever think to look." After a half-hour of searching, they found it, a hollow beneath the roots of the oldest willow tree near the creek. The entrance was small, concealed by a curtain of weeping branches and overgrown ferns. They carefully placed the box inside, tucking it deep into the earth, covering the opening with leaves and dirt until it was virtually invisible. "Okay," Avery said, brushing the dirt from her hands. "Now what?" "Now," Ben said, his voice serious, "we make a pact." He held out his hand. We only use the stones if it's absolutely necessary. For emergencies. And only to help other people. Avery looked at his outstretched hand at the determined set of his jaw. This wasn't about wishes anymore. It was about responsibility. She took his hand, her grip firm. I promise. The walk home was quiet, filled with the unspoken weight of their secret. The air smelled of damp earth and decaying leaves, a scent that would forever be intertwined with the memory of the box and its potent contents. Life went on. Summers faded into autumns, and the familiar rhythm of school and chores filled their days. The box remained hidden, undisturbed beneath the willow's weeping branches. There were moments, of course, when Avery was tempted, when a scraped knee throbbed or a particularly difficult math problem loomed. But she remembered Ben's serious face, the weight of their promise, and the unsettling experience with Mrs. Gable's garden. Then, one winter, a fierce storm ripped through town, flooding the creek and damaging several homes. The community center where the town held its food bank lost its roof. Avery and Ben exchanged a look. Without a word, they knew what they had to do. They retrieved the box. They used a handful of the stones, not for themselves, but to subtly influence donations, to guide skilled contractors to offer their services at reduced rates, to ensure the community center was rebuilt stronger than before. They returned the box to its hiding place, lighter now, not just in weight, but in spirit. Years later, Avery, now a young woman, stood by the creek, the willow tree a familiar sentinel. She thought of the box hidden beneath its roots, of the 32 stones and the power they held. The true treasure, she realized, wasn't the ability to grant wishes. It was the understanding that came with wielding such power. The responsibility to use it wisely, the importance of kindness, and the enduring strength of a promise made. The stones hadn't just changed the town, they had changed her, and Ben, shaping them into something more than they were before.